I figure I may as well do an official tier list, and let's see how we think all these teams are going to do. So in terms of categories, likely to win, obviously, as it sounds, these are teams that I'm only going to put someone here if I have a really strong feeling that they're going to either win the event or it would be a shock to see them not get to the finals. So I think that's what's going to go into this top category. Top contender, these would be teams that I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they ended up winning, but I don't expect them to. But with that said, I still think that they're pretty likely to make it a pretty deep run in the tournament, you know, win a match or two matches, get to the semifinals, maybe get knocked out against some of the teams who are likely to win at the top. Will do well, I think, are going to be teams that I expect to win a match, although I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up losing in the first round. I mean, there are only 15 teams in the event. They're listed down here at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully I'm not blocking anyone. I don't think so. And will do poorly is going to be teams that I would probably expect not to win any matches in the event. And then the very bottom green category is going to be reserved mostly for players, or not players, teams that I kind of expect are just entering this event for some experience. I know that there are some junior teams or teams with younger players on it that are going to be entering. So hopefully I'll be able to identify those when we get to the teams. I know that one of the players who is playing was telling me about some of the competition as we were talking on stream a while back. And then Dark Horse, this last category, I think is going to be reserved for teams that could do quite well, but also could just do very badly. So I'm going to throw them into this last category. I probably wouldn't expect any of these teams to win, but they could probably fall anywhere between the top contender category and the in for a bad time, would be my guess for any teams that do end up there. So I guess let's get into it. If you wanted to follow along at home, you'll probably, I'm not going to flip back and forth between the actual teams, but I will talk about some of the players on the teams when we get there. So I think I'm just going to go top to bottom, left to right. We'll start with Team Gu. So this team has Zhang Gu and Aitai Lo, two players who had played on teams with me in the online bridge leagues, the alt tournaments, the OCBLs, those sorts of events. They tend to do quite well. I do believe that both of those players are more match point players than they are team players, although they play fine at teams as well, but their specialty, kind of much like mine, I would say, is more geared toward match point play as opposed to team play. Walter Lee and Josh Scher are another partnership on that team. I know I've played against them a little bit in the past. In comparison with the rest of the field, I think that so far those two partnerships on this team are a little bit outclassed by some of the other players. The final partnership, they are playing six-handed. There are actually quite a few teams that are playing four-handed or even five-handed, which will give them a little bit of a disadvantage in this event. But this is a six-handed team. Last partnership is Alex Kolesnik and Ron Smith. So this is a team which, as far as I know, doesn't have a sponsor on it, although I could be wrong about that. So from that perspective, they have a little bit of an edge over some of the teams just because all three of their partnerships are going to be well-practiced expert pairs. But the fact that they don't have a sponsor also kind of means that it's going to be hard to pull in top talent. So third pair, Kolesnik and Ron Smith. I will be getting a game with Ron at some point. We will be streaming it when Ron and I start playing a little bit. I don't know if we're going to be prepping for nationals at some point coming up, or if it's just going to be a little bit for fun, but we do have confirmed Ron and I are going to play at some point in the near future, probably after the trials are over. But my expectation is that Kolesnik and Smith, I don't think they're regular partners. I know that they both used to live in California together, though I think they were at opposite ends of the state. So I'm not certain that they're that familiar with each other's playing style. But both pretty solid players. Again, despite Ron having a miracle run with his four-handed team in the recent Vanderbilts, I think also possibly outclassed a little bit by some of the other pairs in the field. So ultimately, this is a team, I wish I had done this team maybe a bit later. I could see them either sitting in will do well or will do poorly, one of those categories. I guess for now I'll put them in the middle tier, will do well. I might do a little bit of rearranging once I get through some of the other teams. Next up on the list, Hammond. So aside from Greg Hinsey and Doug Daub, who I think are partnering. I know I looked this up in the past. Let me just take a quick look again. No, it's Hinsey and Shermer. Hinsey and John Shermer. So Neil Chambers and John Shermer are very old at this point. I know they were playing senior trials back when I was playing pro, which would have been at least 10 years ago. So they're kind of a practice partnership, and for them to split up seems a little bit strange. Who is Bob Hammond playing with on the team? Bob Hammond is playing with Neil Chambers, so Wildowski and Doug Daub are playing together. Okay, that all makes sense. But breaking up a long-time partnership obviously causes some issues with the team. My personal opinion, and this might not be very popular, is that Bob Hammond is way beyond his prime and definitely not a top-tier expert player anymore. I don't think he was the couple of times that I played against him in US team trials or other big team events. And, he just keeps getting older. Obviously, one of the legends of the game, very great player. Lots of fun to watch, really nice guy overall, great partner. But in terms of ability level, I think that Bob is way past his prime. This is a team that I think they have some potential to, win a match, but I think it's far more likely that they're actually going to end up losing in the first round of the event, and it might depend on their seed. Now, it is important to note the way that this thing is structured. A few of these teams are going to get byes coming out of the round robin. So Nickel is getting a bye to the quarterfinals, round of 8. And let's see, Fleischer and Leibowitz. Okay, all three of those names are together. So Fleischer and Leibowitz are getting byes out of the round robin. They're going to just be assigned the 2 and 3 seeds. Leibowitz, I think, gets the 2 seed and Fleischer gets the 3 seed based on performance in past years, performance of their team players in Vanderbilt, Spin Gold, Solway knockouts in the US championships, or past Bermudable performance, so on and so forth. So all three of those teams are getting byes. The rest of the teams don't get disqualified in the round robin, but they are going to be playing for seeding. So if Hammond, for example, emerges from the round robin with the 4th seed, they win the round robin, they're going to end up playing against one of the lower ranked seeds in the first round, and then I think they would have a little bit of a better chance to win. All of the players on that team have been here before and have a ton of experience, which will help out, especially if you're playing against a lower ranked team or a team with less experience. But for now, Hammond, I'm sticking in the will do poorly category. I don't expect them to win the first round of the event. Han. So this is a 4-player team, and one of the players, I was told, is a junior player. I think Cheng Zhang. Apologies for butchering the Chinese names, but that's going to happen quite a lot. So it looks like either a family partnership, because 2 players with the same last name, Brian Zhang and Cheng Zhang, or possibly married. I'm not entirely sure. And then I'm not familiar with any of the other players on the team. I guess I could probably spend a minute trying to look them up, but just because I haven't heard the names doesn't mean they aren't necessarily someone who's competed well in world championships in the past. But my suspicion is that this team might be in for a bit of a bad time. It looks like they are here to have fun, and have fun they will. They'll play 4 full days, because they'll play 2 days of round robin, and then they'll still have a full 2-day knockout match against very likely one of the top teams, Nickel, Leibowitz, Fleischer, depending on where they end up coming out of the round robin. So this will be excellent experience for them, but they're not seriously in contention to make it out of the round of 16, I don't believe. So we'll put them down there. But they should be fun to watch. Maybe we'll be able to catch a segment of them playing, and that could be a fun time. Next up on the list is Bailey. So Bailey is a 5-handed team. They have 2 sponsors, Bill Bailey and RT Bhargava, who Josh Don is going to be rotating, playing with 2 of the sponsors on the team. And I don't know if that means they're going to play the same system. I think that would be very helpful. Although Josh is a player who, like, his memory is exceptionally good, he shouldn't have a difficult time, memorizing 2 full systems, depending on which ones each of his partners want to play. And then the other pair on the team, Aaron Jones, Owen Lean. Again, I think pretty severely outclassed by some of the other top experts in this field, unfortunately for them. And given that they're more or less going to be mimicking a 4-handed team where a sponsor is going to be playing the entire time, I think these guys are in trouble. But with that said, Owen Lean, for example, is a player who he likes to operate. And that could work out really well for his team if they get into, maybe a close match or even a match where they're down a little bit going into the final segment or 2. Owen definitely has the capability to turn the match around and bring them a win, ultimately. But I think just the fact the team makeup, they're 5-handed, and a sponsor is going to be playing every single board is going to cause quite a few problems for them once they get to the knockout stage, when, depending on who they play against, I mean, as long as they're up against a team that does have 4 pro players on it, there will be a bit of a separation opened up pretty likely during the segments where those 4 pro players are going to be sitting in. And so I think they're pretty unlikely to make it out of the round of 16. So I'll put them down here. Hey, Shift. Good afternoon. Up next is Bramley. Okay. This is an interesting team to try and rank. They're 4-handed and they have no sponsor. So Bart Bramley playing with Kit Woolsey. They have been a long-time partnership for a while. Brian Platnick playing with Kevin Rosenberg. They've also been playing together quite a lot. I mean, Kevin's not that old, so he doesn't have 20 years of experience playing with Platnick, but they've certainly played together for quite a few national cycles in the past. I would expect them to win their opening round match in the round of 16. So the real question for me is, do I think they're going to be a top contender, as someone who's likely to make it to the semifinals, or are they someone who is likely to win a match, might get to the semifinals, but pretty unlikely to move on from there? So far, based on the teams that I've seen, Bramley is definitely the strongest team. Obviously, we haven't gotten to Nickel, Leibowitz, and Fleischer, who are likely to go up towards the top of the tier list. I think for now, I'm going to leave them in the will do well category, right next alongside with Goo. But I might make an adjustment later on as we see where the rest of the teams are falling. Okay, on to I have no idea how to pronounce this. Balason. Balason? Probably Balason. Oh, actually, this I think might be the team with a Chinese player who is a junior. Nicole Zhan, I believe, is the one. So maybe I was incorrect about the previous Han team. Either way, I kind of expect that some of these teams with juniors on it, or some of the teams with players that I've never heard of before, might be in for a bit of a bad time. So Balason, I will need to learn how to pronounce these names before I do the actual commentary. Making a mental note right now of that. So Aaron Balason, captain. They're four-handed. Again, not a great look for a team that I'm not sure if this team is sponsored, because there appear to be three Chinese-sounding names, and then Balason, which I believe is distinctly not Chinese or of Asian origin. So it's possible that it's a sponsored team with three pro players that I've never heard of, or maybe it's just four amateur players as well. I think that's more likely, especially with the junior on the team, that it's going to be four amateurs. I think similar to the Han team, I'm probably going to stick them in the in for a bad time bracket. Again, it's very possible that they might come out of the round robin with a slightly higher seed, and they will have a chance to win their first round match, but I really don't expect them to. And of course, being four-handed, even after 2 days of round robin, going into a full 2-day knockout, you're still going to... Fatigue is going to set in a little bit for you at that point. Up next on the list, Juicer. So this is six-handed. There is one sponsor, Jeffrey Juicer, or Jeff Juicer, playing with Jacob Morgan. The other two pairs on the team are Andy Goodman playing with Mike Purcell. They've played together for quite some time. And Shan Wong playing with Kevin Dwyer-Rimstedt. They've also played together quite a lot. So pretty well-practiced partnerships on the team. I haven't seen Shan and Kevin play all that much recently, but I mean, they used to be a very strong expert pair. Kevin, of course, himself was on the USA 1 team in the past. He was playing with Kevin Bathurst at the time. This would have been probably 10 years ago now, maybe 12 years ago. Shan, I don't know if he's had that much success, but he was also a very strong player at the time, and I can't imagine that he's gotten worse since I've seen him play last. And of course, Purcell and Goodman are a solid partnership. I was impressed with Jacob Morgan at the Gatlinburg Regional, not only when we played against his team, and his team did quite well, but he seemed to have good table composure, and he did a lot of things right, which is always a good thing. I mean, I do expect, some of the teams in this event are going to do a little bit better than that, like the Nickel team, for example, who recently won the Vanderbilt. But yeah, I feel like Jacob Morgan has impressed me quite a lot. I think this team's actually going to do quite well. I'd expect them to win their first round matchup. I mean, I expect them to come out of the round robin with a pretty nice seed, either 4th or 5th, given that the 1, 2, and 3 seeds have already been claimed. And I expect them to kind of cruise to victory in their first match. Now, are they going to make it much past there? There are a lot of good teams, so I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to the semifinals. I think this is not a team that is likely to make it to the finals. I could definitely see sticking them as a dark horse candidate, but for now I'm going to put them in the will do well category. And we're on to the big guns. Fleischer, Leibowitz, Nickel coming up. So Fleischer is given the 3 seed. Their team is Fleischer and Martel, who have been playing together as partners for 20 plus years. Moss and Grew, probably pretty similar. And Bathurst and Hurd, who Bathurst and Hurd were just on the team with Ron Smith and Chris Compton, finishing 2nd in the recent Vanderbilt. So all very strong partnerships. Of course, they deserve their 3 seed coming into the event and a bye out of the round robin. So they're going to be very well rested coming into their first match. Do I think that this team has a really strong chance of winning? I'm gonna say, I almost want to put them as a dark horse, although that might get misconstrued with someone seeing them at the bottom of the standings. I think the other two top teams, man, it's really hard to say that Fleischer is not going to be likely to win, isn't it? Bathurst and Hurd have come off a strong performance at the Nationals. I mean, Moss and Grew always seem to do quite well, and Fleischer and Martel are a formidable partnership. Even though Marty sponsors the team, they can beat up on all the best of them. I'm torn. I'm very torn. Schiff thinks Fleischer might win it all. It's possible. It's definitely possible. I feel like Fleischer has had a bit of a bad run recently. Well, obviously Bathurst and Hurd were part of the team that knocked out Fleischer in the recent Vanderbilt. But I feel like I just haven't heard of them doing all that well in too many recent events. How did they do in the fall nationals in the Soloways? I don't remember how Fleischer did in the fall nationals. I don't think they won. I recall they finished second in the summer nationals last year. But the past couple of events, they haven't been near the top. I'm going to put them in top contender. I don't think they're likely to win, although I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But my expectation is they might lose to either Nickel or Leibowitz. Well, I guess Leibowitz specifically in the semifinals, if both of them make it that far, which seems somewhat likely because Fleischer is the 3 seed, Leibowitz is the 2 seed. Maybe that's how I should determine between Fleischer and Leibowitz. Let's stick both of them here. I will come back to this matchup at the very end. Leibowitz team is both Grosacks, Larry Leibowitz, Michael Rosenberg, Zia Mahmood, and Dan Corbel. Although the partnerships on the team are mixed up a little bit. I know that Michael Rosenberg and Zia Mahmood had played together in the past, but they're not playing together on this team. It is going to be Dan Corbel playing with Zia, Michael Rosenberg playing with Zach Grosack, and Adam Grosack playing with Larry Leibowitz. So those are the matchups. I will come back to that match and pick one of the teams to move up to the likely to win bracket. Nickel, most recent Vanderbilt winner. I mean, what more can I say? These guys have won this event more than anyone else in history, I think. I mean, maybe Hammond, but this team has certainly been a dominant force in US Bridge for the past several decades. They're definitely in the likely to win category. It's the same team that they had for the Vanderbilt, Nickel and Katz, Levin and Weinstein, Hampson and Greco. They even have Bobby's wife, Jill, acting as a non-playing captain, which might not be that important for a US-based tournament, as all of these are local player, well, not local to the Illinois area, but local to the US area. But these non-playing captains, I think as Gavin had mentioned when he came on stream a while back, talking about the Bermuda Bowl, they do play a pretty critical role in making sure that the team's functional on a daily basis, planning out food and a bunch of other things. So that can be very helpful. That is, in fact, I think the only team in the event who has a non-playing captain on it. So I'm sure that they're all appreciative of the work that Jill is going to do for them, but maybe not as impactful as if you're traveling overseas, having someone be able to manage all of the things that so that you can just worry about the bridge. Simpson, last on the list alphabetically. So this team has a bit of an interesting makeup. Doug Simpson is playing with Eric Rodwell, who I don't know if Rodwell has been active in USBCs in the past. Obviously, there was a little bit of an incident with him during the pandemic, and so he was unable to play professional bridge, and then he and Mexstroth split up, and Mexstroth seems to have thrived in his absence, playing with Zia and Berkowitz and, almost anyone, and still performing at quite a high level. But Rodwell doesn't seem to have kind of gotten back into form ever since his hiatus for a number of years. So I don't know how he's going to do. In Gatlinburg, he didn't perform particularly well, I don't think, on the team that he was playing on. It obviously wasn't a exceptionally strong team. So I wasn't impressed. I didn't get to play against him in Gatlinburg, so I'm kind of speaking based on the results as opposed to anything else. But they also have Eddie Wold and Venkatro Conneru, who have played together quite a bit, and also Joel Wooldridge and David Granger, who have played together quite a lot. This is a team I would expect to win their opening match, especially given that we have, a couple of these teams towards the bottom of the standings that I think are fairly weak and likely to get rolled over by teams with, more practice partnerships, although Simpson and Rodwell are a bit of a coin flip as to whether or not they're going to be able to mesh. But presumably they've been doing some practicing leading up to the event, and hopefully they'll be in decent form. But the other 4 players on their team are obviously excellent class for this field. So I think they definitely will do well. I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to the semifinals, but I don't expect them to make it much farther than that. There are some very strong teams in the event. Robinson, next on the list. So not the Robinson that people might be familiar with competing in this thing, which would be Steve Robinson playing with Peter Boyd, but this is Eric Robinson playing with Michael Camel. The other 2 partnerships on the team are Steve Garner and Dave Berkowitz, and Ish Del Monte and Finn Kolesnik. So I have a lot of respect for Michael's ability to handle clients. I played on teams with him several times in the past, and he was exceptionally good at not letting things get out of hand, which I think is a really important skill. Because sometimes, especially, I don't know about Eric Robinson specifically, but there are definitely sponsors who are more on the emotional side of things. And if things start going poorly, then, all hell breaks loose. And they just end up losing a segment by 100 imps. So Camel, I think, is one of the players who is very good at controlling that sort of flow and making sure that mistakes don't compound in a set. And the other 2 partnerships on the team, Finn Kolesnik, Ish Del Monte, I haven't seen them playing together much recently, but they did play in the Solidways back in 2022. They won that event 4-handed. And David Berkowitz and Steve Garner, again, not really sure how often they play, but both of them are very strong players. This is a team I actually think I'm going to throw into the dark horse category. I'm confident about the dark horse for them. I could definitely see them being a top contender. I don't think they're likely to win. They're not the same kind of caliber as the Nickel team. But if they did win, I wouldn't be that surprised. They have a lot of players on the team who have real potential to make a deep run into these events. And Finn Kolesnik, Ish Del Monte are a bit of a wild card, especially with Finn being so young, but he had impressed me during his Solways run. He seems to always do quite well in a lot of the events that he plays. We even saw he was leading the Robot NABC after the first day. And David Berkowitz is a very strong player. I've been familiar with the Berkowitz family for quite a while. and David really seems to know what he's doing. I mean, I could say that about almost any of the players in this event, but just from personal experience talking with David a little bit about bridge, he seems to really have a good grasp on the game and, you know, how to win. So yeah, I'm going to throw them in the dark horse category. I think I think they definitely could make it to the semis, so putting them as a top contender would make sense, but we'll leave them down here. Obviously, things could crumble for them and they end up going home early, but I think that's the perfect description for them in this event. Shearson. Okay. So I don't know exactly what's going on with this team. I know Will Watson, who's one of the players on the team, was in the chat the other day and telling me that they have a couple of different threesomes of partners that are going to be playing. This seems like a horrible idea to me. I'm just going to throw that out there. I understand with the Bailey team earlier that we talked about down here, where Josh Don is kind of rotating with two sponsors on the team, that's just the way the team had to be set up. And so Josh has a little bit of extra mental strain on himself, but the sponsors will not. And so they only have to learn their own system. It's just one player, it's one pro player, and all he needs to do is learn two different systems to play. So maybe a little bit of mental anxiety with that, but not as bad as what I think is happening with the Shearson team, which is that they're trios of players, like multiple trios of players that are like rotating in and out. I think this is going to go horribly. My experience with this is that this is a super fun thing to do with a junior team if you enter into like a regional knockout. But playing in like one of these premier events like the US team trials against all of these, you know, very solidly put together teams who have partnerships that have been discussing bridge with their partner for 10, 20 years and have all of their agreements well ironed out, or almost all of them, you're going to get to the third round of the auction and you're just going to start dumping imps because your decisions will be much worse than the players at the other table, given that you haven't practiced with the same partners and that you're not playing with the same partners in this event. So I think they're in huge trouble. The entire team is Max Shearson, Olivia Shearson, so I think that's father and daughter, John McAllister, Debbie Rosenberg, and Will Watson. And, you know, on top of all these other things, I don't think that... I have no idea what the sponsorship situation is for the team. I know McAllister usually sponsors teams, and maybe Max Shearson does too. It's possible. Not sure. But in terms of caliber of pro players on the team, Olivia, Will, and Debbie, I think are all, once again, severely outclassed by their counterparts at the other tables. So coupling that with the fact that the partnerships are all going to be out of whack, I think these guys are also in for a pretty bad time in the event. Petrov. Okay, another fairly interesting team. So I would say that I didn't know much about this team until I played against one of their members, Val Kovachev, in Gatlinburg. So they're a four-handed team. Deanne Petrov, Val Kovachev are not partners. In fact, it's going to be Kovachev and Matthew Haag are playing together. And then Rumen Dimitrov is playing with Deanne Petrov. I don't know if this is a sponsored team. My guess is that it is, but it's a four-handed team. And either way, in general, I think four-handed teams often aren't going to do great. When I played against Val Kovachev in Gatlinburg, I was very unimpressed. There was the one hand from my recap, if we recall, where he was defending four hearts against Kurt. He ended up getting end-played, had to break the spade suit, and this gave Kurt an opportunity to make his four of a major contract. If instead Kovachev had just cashed the ace of trumps, preventing himself from getting end-played, then he wouldn't have been in that problem. or he wouldn't have been in that position, and the contract would have just gone down naturally. So, I mean, couple that with a couple of other things that I think might have been less than optimal plays from him. I wasn't that impressed. So I don't think that this team's going to do great, but are they in for a bad time? Probably not. Although I'm not that familiar with some of the players. I mean, obviously, Kovacev is a top-tier pro player in the U.S., seems to do well in all of these bracket one knockouts at regionals. Obviously dominated our team in Gatlinburg. They won the match 20-0 in terms of VPs. So they're probably a team that won't make it out of the round of 16, but I don't think that they're there just to have fun. They probably have some chance to make it out. Final team on the list, and then we'll get back to the 2-3 matchup, Fleischer-Leibowitz. Rosenthal. Ooh. I was not prepared for this one to be last, but maybe this is good. Now I've looked at all of the other teams. So Rosenthal, this is a strong team. We have Andrew Rosenthal and Aaron Silverstein, who have been playing together for quite some time. In fact, their team, along with Debbie and Michael Rosenberg, playing four-handed, ended up winning Gatlinburg. They won the most master points of anyone at the tournament. I don't know if that meant they won every single knockout they played in, but they did end up winning the final Swiss on Sunday, and they collected over 150 master points, I think, for the tournament, which is a substantial amount. So that's one of their pairs. Then we have Chris Willinkin playing with Gavin Wolpert. This feels like a little bit of a strange partnership to me. Gavin is well known for playing with team sponsors. I, in fact, don't know the last time that Gavin played with someone who wasn't a sponsor. Maybe Weinstein. I think he has played with Steve Weinstein more recently than the last decade. But generally, he does play with the sponsors on teams. So I'm not sure how well they're going to function. I also don't know how long they've been practicing together, because this does not seem like the normal kind of hookup. Obviously, Chris Willinkin is Helgamo's regular partner for nationals and international type events. But both of them incredibly strong players in their own right. And then John Kraniak and Vince DeMoy, who have been here before, have won this event numerous times on many different teams. They've certainly proved themselves as one of the standout U.S. partnerships. So Rosenthal is going to be a strong team. Wow. What am I supposed to do with them? I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to argue against Nickel in any way, but I think Rosenthal, from what I've seen, might even be the second most likely to win team. I'm going to go ahead and stick them up there in the likely to win category. And should I get back to the Fleischer-Leibowitz duel? Or do I not need to anymore? I've found two teams that I think are likely to win, albeit if Rosenthal ends up winning the round robin, they get assigned the 4 seed. And so they will end up facing off against Nickel in the semifinals. Fleischer and Leibowitz are on a crash course for the other semifinal as well. But if Rosenthal doesn't win the round robin, they could get the 5 seed, and then they might end up in this 3-way with Fleischer and Leibowitz before they end up getting to the finals against Nickel. It's possible. But we have yet to see. So I think I'm actually pretty happy with this list. Nickel and Rosenthal are two teams that I think are fairly likely to win. Fleischer and Leibowitz also have their opportunities, but they are going to be head-to-head before the finals even. And then they'll also have to get through Nickel, Rosenthal, or possibly some other team if they make it out of that match. Gu, Bramley, Juster, and Simpson, I think, kind of round out the top 8. So these are probably the 8 teams that I might expect to make it to the quarterfinals. Obviously, matchups could affect this, so it's possible some of these teams will play against each other in the opening round, and therefore we don't get to see all 8 of them. But that would be my guess for the teams that do end up making it. Hammond, Bailey, and Petrov, probably towards the bottom of the standings here. Unlikely to win their first match, but are made up of some fairly strong players. Han, there's no way I'm gonna... Ballison, and Shearson, I think they're in a lot of trouble. We could definitely... I don't expect these teams to end up conceding in the first round match, but we could definitely see victories of 200 imps over 120 boards, which is what they're going to be playing. And then Robinson could land anywhere. I'm giving them the dark horse vote because I really don't know where to put them. That is... I think that's a good tier list.